Stay tuned. Ahead I'll talk with Gabriel Reilich and Lucia Knell about UPWORTHY, Good People, Stories from the Best of Humanity. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and this is Some Books Considered. Gabriel Reilich is the head of content and innovation at UPWORTHY. Lucia Knell is the vice president of brand at UPWORTHY. And they join us to talk about the book from National Geographic that they co-edited, UPWORTHY, Good People, Stories from the Best of Humanity. Gabe and Lucia, welcome to Some Books Considered.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Before we talk about the book itself, tell us about UPWORTHY and its mission.
Yeah, Dan. UPWORTHY is a media outlet dedicated to sharing the best of humanity with the world. And basically what that means is Lucia and I and the whole team there, every day we're looking for stories about compassion, empathy, connection, laughter, good things to connect over that I think people are really looking for that, you may not always see commanding headlines, but are happening every day among people and deserve to have a spotlight on them. So UPWORTHY has always been trying to get those stories out there in whatever ways possible, whatever mediums possible. We're particularly well known, in addition to our editorial on upworthy.com, on our Instagram at UPWORTHY, where we have over 5 million followers and we reach, dozens of millions of people every month. And it's just it's a really great thing to see the community that has been built up over time. And, I think the interest that people have to connect over stories that show the good things that people are about.
And we live in very contentious times, as you know. So was that part of the impetus to get this book out there and share these stories in a written, tangible way, more so than just the website?
Yeah, taking UPWORTHY offline was very intentional. It's one of my favorite things that we took this media brand that has so much love and equity on the internet, and actually taking a step back and saying, hey, this is wonderful, but also social media can have a really charged sort of potentially negative impact on the way you see the world. If you're being exposed to negative headlines, most of the time, it has the potential to sort of paint how you see the world. While UPWORTHY is working to counterbalance that and counteract that, what is a form that we could take to preserve the stories that we're seeing on UPWORTHY in a way that's not beholden to the powers that be on social media, where algorithms are designed to keep you just scrolling and moving, and suddenly these beautiful stories we're seeing are lost. So the intention was to take it offline, and also from a mental health standpoint, to give people something, to your point, Dan, to hold on to, something that's tactile, something that takes you away from screens, away from blue light, away from algorithms, and just gives you an opportunity to come back to the present moment and take a deep breath. Get in bed, cozy up with something that you can just spend some time with and focus on without having a million distractions, which, in 2024 seems almost like a radical act, as it were.
Well, tell us about how this book is organized. What are people going to find here? Yeah,
so, the book took shape because we noticed something interesting happening on our Instagram account. And what was happening was, when we would throw up a post on there, people would respond, and sometimes they would respond by sharing stories of their own. Say we share, a particularly moving thing about a teacher, and people be like, this reminds me about a time that I had a teacher who did something similar or did something I'll never forget. And seeing those kind of stories that people would share was our favorite thing to see. Lucia and I would screenshot them, we'd share them with each other, and, we'd sometimes turn them into their own posts. And it gave us an opportunity to, get to know the people who were following us. And so we started being a little more intentional about it by kind of asking questions to the audience to, kind of hear more of these personal experiences with the best of humanity that people had. Questions like, what's the time you experienced kindness from a stranger? Or who's that teacher you had that you'll never forget? What's a little thing that somebody did for you that had an outsized impact in your life? And we'd get thousands and thousands and thousands of responses. Lucia and I read through every single one. And then we'd reach out to people for the ones that we thought were the seeds of, something that could make up a short story and be in a book to get to know more, interview them and turn them into the stories. And so the chapters in the book are kind of built around those original questions that we asked people and the themes that emerged. So, we have a whole chapter on teachers, because when you ask somebody, like, what's an experience that you had with somebody that makes you believe in, people, the goodness of people, people talk about teachers, like they can't stop talking about teachers. So, that deserved a chapter of its own. And we asked specifically about teachers. And then we noticed themes emerging, little things that stuck with people, because we also asked about that. A lot of this emerged originally from the question, tell us about a time you experienced kindness from a stranger. And, there is a chapter on that. But within that, there were little things, there were huge things. There was stuff that happened when people were traveling abroad. There were, passing interactions that people had with the youth, that gave them faith for the future. And so that all those themes kind of turned into the various chapters in the book, kind of like a natural tapestry of, the beauty of humanity that kind of emerged by having those questions answered.
So you've got the chapters, you've got the stories, but you also have little spotlights. Tell us a bit about those.
Yes, some of these spotlights, we don't have any favorites here, just to be clear, but there are some spotlights that really, make you laugh or can make you tear up in just a few sentences. So to be clear, all of these stories, as Gabe mentioned, originated as comments in our comment section, which is also worth noting. It's like everyone says, don't read the comments. We read the comments. We proudly read the comments on our page. We're lucky that we've created this beautiful, rare community online that's based on constructive dialogue and support and joy. And so these spotlights, to your point, Dan, are the original comments, just taken, directly from the comment section. So some of them we kept as is and said, this is too good, we need to sprinkle them throughout. And it's just a nice way to break up the flow of the book.
Yeah, really short form. Some of them, I think, the shortest one is about like 10 words. And,
Yeah.
But they all stick with you.
Yeah, there's one that stuck with me just immediately because it was so cute. And I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have it in front of me to get it exactly right. But this child was writing, "I like Daddy. Where did we get him?"
That's perfect. One of my favorites also from that kids chapter is a mom is playing some song and this 5-year-old says, "Oh, I love this song. It makes me feel like I'm 4 again." It's like, you can't make it up. It's real life. This is the stuff that comes out in real life, and we're just able to capture it and sort of redistribute it.
This is a question for both of you, a request, actually. Could you, obviously I'm not asking you to read a whole story, but could you just sort of tell us about a story in the book that will give people an idea of the kind of material they're going to find here? And maybe I'll start with you, Lucia, if you don't mind.
Sure. I just have so many, but I'm going to tell a brief sort of overview of a story called The Front Porch, which is by a woman named Lynn, who we've gotten to know actually over the last year, which has been very rewarding and amazing. It's a story about this wonderful relationship she has with her grandmother, where they would sit on her grandmother's front porch all the time and just, bond and gab and laugh and all these things. Her grandmother ends up passing, unfortunately. And what Lynn is really dreading is this feeling of driving, past her grandmother's house and not seeing her on the front porch anymore. She ends up divulging in a man named Fred at the memorial service and telling him, I'm really dreading this moment and I have a lot of anxiety about it. And upon leaving the memorial, she's bracing herself to pass her grandmother's house. And, upon turning the corner, she sees none other than Fred sitting on the front porch. And he says to her, "I didn't want you to come home to an empty porch." Yeah. So I've read the story, and Gabe by proxy has read the story hundreds and hundreds of times, and every time I tear up. It hits something because, it reveals this idea that you can make a huge difference for someone in a small, thoughtful act. It doesn't need to be super over the top. It doesn't need to be something requiring lots of time, energy, or money. It's just a moment of saying, I can show up for this person in a way that's like pretty simple. And the story stuck with her for decades. There's a reason, it's informed the way she sees the world. It's informed the way she sees people. And yeah, that's just one that I come back to again and again.
And how about you, Gabe?
Yeah, I mean, again, so many come to mind, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, the way that most of these stories and all of them together come together to, tell just the overarching and, present kind of like the tapestry of human decency is what I really respond to. But, I'll mention a book. I'll mention a story that closes out the book. It's called Curly Fries, and this is one I always go back to. And it's about a young man who's in the military, and he was on leave, and he's heading back to the base. I think he's stationed like Port Aransas in Texas, and he has a long drive ahead of him. He stops at a diner. He's like really tired and kind of quasi delirious and feeling a little down. He walks in the diner and he sees a guy wearing a funny shirt. I won't say what the shirt is because you'll have to read the book to know that. But he laughs about it, and he tells the guy, "Hey, cool shirt. I really love that." And the two begin to connect. I think the other guy's a veteran too, and so they're talking a bit. And he asks him how he's getting back to where he's going. John, who is the guy who wrote the story, who it's focused on, says, "Oh, this is the route I'm taking." He goes, No, you got to take a different route. Much better if you go this way. So he plots out a course for him. And John's like, all right. And he decides to do that. It's a longer drive, but during that drive, it gives him a chance to kind of see, the country in a different way, and also see himself in a different way, and pause and reflect. And, it's a small thing that really has a profound impact in his life later on. And he always goes back to it as he's dealing with, difficulties, of which he has, some really profound difficulties that he has to deal with later in his life. And, I love it because it just seems like such a random encounter with a person who just, tells him, hey, drive a different direction. But that drive gave him the space to think and the space to feel and the space to connect with himself at a time that he really needed it then, and a moment to go back to in the future that really mattered to him. And I just love that concept of space and the reality of needing that. And I always think like, God, that's in such short supply now. Like, we're constantly just like taking in new information, responding, reacting. So little time that we allow ourselves for moments to pause and reflect. And so, I love that story a lot. And then it makes me appreciate books in general. In this book, you have a time to pause and reflect by reading this story, and maybe it'll be an opportunity to connect with something that'll provide some solace and power in a moment when people need it in the future. The book is the story is called Curly Fries. So yeah, look it up if you get a chance to read the book.
Well, this book sounds like the kind of book that you don't have to just sit down and read it, in order. You can just dip into it and find different things each time you dip into it that will mean something to you.
Yeah, that's the best part is you can open to any page in this book and read one story, a handful of stories. They're bite-sized, and it'll give you enough of a moment and a jolt to say, wow, this makes me feel better, or this makes me feel hopeful, or this is a really lovely way to start my day, or this is a really lovely way to end my day. We recommend it, as bedside reading in place of your phone, and just see what happens, see what happens when you give your brain and your body a moment to just calm down naturally and get tired naturally and not have to just feel overstimulated all the time. So, yeah.
I'm talking with Gabriel Reilich and Lucia Knell about Upworthy, Good People, Stories from the Best of Humanity. And our conversation continues in a moment. If you're enjoying this discussion, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. And thank you. So you get a lot of feedback from your people who enjoy the website. How do you sift through all that and decide which things to include in this book?
Well, it helps that it was such a rewarding process, because like I said, we're lucky enough that we have so many people willing to share with us. And I think that comes from a place of trust. We try to be a friend to people on the internet, not like a brand that's, trying to sell something to people or, trick them into clicking a link to, I don't know, sign up for some course or whatever it may be. It started with Lucia and I just needing this ourselves, needing a place where we could catalog that there were decent things happening in the world, because when it really started blowing up, it was, there was a lot of difficult things happening. I mean, there still are. It's always in demand. And so we were surprised to see that people needed that too. And so it's a bit of a public service, and the amount of stuff that came in, the amount of things that people were willing to share, the stories that they trusted us with were so many. And it was difficult, to decide, okay, this is the one that deserves to go into the book. But the way that we did it is we just really leaned into the idea of like, okay, well, what do we want to know more about here? What's something that we think deserves to have the whole story told? Because there's a difference, obviously, between something being a comment on Instagram and what has the potential to appear as, a short story in a book. So that was the first stage, was just, leaning into that feeling of like, I need to know more, because that's what makes, the seeds of a good story. That being said, there were thousands and thousands that could have been in this book. And that's a very encouraging thing, because, maybe there'll be more volumes of it. There are probably enough stories that people shared, moments in their lives, memories that deserve to be kind of enshrined forever on a page, that could fill, dozens of volumes of a book like this.
Well, you mentioned the term good story. What constitutes a good story to you?
To me, it's something that hits you emotionally in a way that feels universal, regardless of who you are, regardless of where you come from. It's the things that make us all human. So feeling, joy, empathy, sadness, sympathy, humor, all of the things that, again, once you read it, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. I think it's also the reason why Upworthy is so successful is because people can see themselves in the stories. And it gives us this rare opportunity, affords us this opportunity in 2024 to actually let go of the identity silos that we're so often slotted into, and just say, you know what, at the end of the day, we all kind of want the same things, right? It's shelter, food on the table, safe neighborhoods, education for our kids, opportunities for delightful moments throughout life. And most of the stories that we saw here, tapped into those themes. And so a good story to me is something that makes you tap into those deep emotions and makes you forget, your differences, really.
Yeah. I think, to Lucia's point, it's about truth, Is there an element of truth in there that speaks to what it means to experience the world, experience connection? And that's what we were trying to find. And, I think that there can be a confusion sometimes that just because something is good, that it's not deep, but hitting on the truth about what it means to just be there for someone or be there for yourself or an important moment in your life is important and powerful as it gets, and makes an incredibly good story. And I think people are really looking for that. And there is a powerful truth in connecting over, aspirational ideals of people, being good to each other.
And another question for both of you. I'm just curious because it seems like you've got a great job here. You get to find out all these wonderful stories, and I'm curious about how working for Upworthy has changed your lives.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the process of creating this book, and it was a long process, right? Multi-year, to kind of put it all together, over 100 stories that are inside Good People. And before that, Lucia and I were, building an Instagram channel from nothing to where it is today, with over, with millions and millions of followers. And so you're reading these stories every day and looking for them and talking about them. And it's a twofold thing. One, it really is training to look for those moments yourself, and it can help you see the world in a different way. Because I think sometimes we're not so inclined to look for the small good things that are happening out there. We're either too focused on something else, or maybe too ready to kind of, look for the opposite, the things that remind us that, wow, things aren't so good. But the pure kind of immersion therapy in human goodness had us looking for it more. And then I would say there's another thing too, that comes with just like being a human being, is like you still deal with problems and you still feel sad sometimes and down. And, when your job is to only look for goodness, that can be a little hard. You're like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way because I'm only looking at good stuff all day. Why do I feel this way? And it's like, well, because that's what being a human being is about, right? I mean, there's no, it's not all one thing or another, and that's okay. It's okay to feel like that. And I think, both Lucia and I had to remind ourselves of that sometimes. And it's also the way the world is. Upworthy isn't always just, it's not about like only look at the good, only pay attention to the good. That's all that's out there. That's all that matters. Press all the negativity away from you because you don't want to invite that into your world. It's about balance, right? It's about understanding that there are two sides to the story of people, of the world, of everything, right? And we have so much exposure to one side of the narrative, which is an important narrative. There are problems. These problems need fixing. You need to do something about it. We shouldn't forget that. But on the other hand, that can't be all that we're seeing. Otherwise, you just get ground down. And unless you give yourself the chance to read and engage with, things that lift you up, how are you going to solve those huge problems that need solving, right? You need to come from a place of inspiration. So that's a bit of a long answer to your question, but it's something that we think about a lot.
And to your point, Gabe, a lot of beauty comes out of really difficult moments. And so like our entire chapter called When I Needed It Most is about folks stepping up and stepping in when someone was at their lowest. It's like there are some really heavy themes in this book because it's life. It's based on real life. These stories are true. They came, from real people in our audience. And so, I think being able to apply the concepts and the learnings from this book to your own life when you're going through a really horrible moment or a really rough moment, and using it as almost a well of support and a well of, as a reminder of these are the moments when the people in my life or folks around me are going to step in, are going to step up. Because time and time again, it happens because it's in our nature. We're altruistic by nature. These stories prove it again and again. We like to think of these as proof points that human decency is all around us. And so, I think that's a big thing. And then the other one I would say around this being our jobs. I mean, we're lucky. This is a really good gig. It's really wonderful to be able to search for stories like this as part of our work. And I also think the exciting part is just seeing the abundance of stories like this. It's like every time we posted a question, we'd get thousands and thousands of responses. It just keeps coming. And so there's no shortage, we're not in short supply of stories of goodness, of kindness, of human decency. Upworthy has sort of just given folks permission, so to speak, to share their stories. And as soon as you give people permission, all bets are off. People are ready to go. So there's something in there to think about. We all have a story like this, whether, be it tiny to the most profound to something your kid said that made you feel joy. And so paying attention to those things and being open to those moments, I think, is really, really helpful.
The book from National Geographic is Upworthy, Good People, Stories from the Best of Humanity, edited by Gabriel Reilich and Lucia Knell. Gabe and Lucia, thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Yeah.
This has been wonderful.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Now, if you'd like to purchase Upworthy, Good People, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. I'm Dan Skinner. Thank you for watching this edition of Some Books Considered.